I did not lose everything at once. I surrendered it, piece by piece. There is a moment when obedience feels like survival. That was when the lie began. I wake each day to stone and ritual, to corridors that remember more than they reveal. The palace moves around me with trained devotion. Servants bow, guards breathe in unison, banners stir as if listening. I sit where I have always sat, speak when expected, nod when silence is safer. War arrives here as murmurs carried on polished floors, never as screams. Love is never named, only avoided, hidden between glances and the careful distance of duty. My family shares meals without truth, prayers without comfort. The throne waits, patient and merciless, as I prepare myself for the cost of what I already know cannot be undone. I was born into marble corridors and measured silences. My earliest memories are not of laughter, but of footsteps echoing at dawn, of banners stirring like restrained breaths, of servants lowering their eyes as though my gaze alone carried consequence. I learned early that a crown is not worn. It presses, it settles into the spine, it bends the neck long before it touches the brow. My name mattered less than my bloodline. I was heir not because I desired it, but because the line required it. That truth was taught to me gently at first, then without mercy. My father believed mercy weakened rule. My mother believed silence preserved it. Between them, I learned how to endure. The palace was alive in its own way, not warm, not kind. Alive like a beast that sleeps with one eye open. Every corridor held memory, every chamber had heard promises broken in whispers. The council met beneath a vaulted ceiling, darkened by age and ambition. They called themselves stewards of the realm. I learned to call them patient men with sharp smiles. At court, love was spoken of as alliance, marriage as remedy, desire as disease. I listened, I nodded, I obeyed. That was my first skill. Yet even obedience can fracture. She came into my life without ceremony. No trumpet announced her presence, no herald spoke her name. She was there one morning in the South Gallery, standing before the old tapestries that told of victories long past. She studied them not with awe, but with quiet sorrow, as though she understood the cost stitched into every thread. She was not meant for me. That was clear from the first breath I took in her presence. She belonged to a lesser house, one bound to the crown by obligation, but never embraced by it. Her family had bled for the throne. They had never benefited from it. We spoke little at first. Words were dangerous things. But silence has weight, and ours grew heavy. In that silence, something forbidden took shape. Not passion at first, recognition, the sense of being seen without demand. I did not tell her who I was the first day. I let her speak to me as a man unburdened. That was my theft. That was my sin. At night, I returned to chambers that felt smaller with every passing day. My father's presence lingered even in his absence. His armor stood polished, unused since the last campaign, a reminder that war was never distant, only waiting. My mother prayed, always prayed for peace, for endurance, never for happiness. My younger brother watched me with eyes too observant for his age. He was everything I was not allowed to be. Curious, gentle, unprepared. I loved him with a fear I could never voice. He believed the throne was a promise. I knew it was a sentence. At meals, the council spoke of borders and grain and restless provinces. They spoke of loyalty as something owed, not earned. They spoke of war as an inevitability, as though bloodshed were weather. I listened, I memorized, I learned when to remain silent, but my heart, treacherous thing, began to speak in other moments, in stolen glances, in the brush of hands beneath stone arches where no one lingered, in the way her voice softened when she spoke my name, not my title. We never spoke of the future. That was another rule we obeyed without agreement. The future belonged to the throne, to the council, to men who would never know her eyes. My family sensed the shift in me before I understood it myself. My mother's prayers grew longer. My father's gaze hardened. He spoke to me of duty with renewed urgency, of alliances left uncemented, of a marriage proposed by a house whose loyalty could be purchased with my body and name. I did not refuse. I delayed. Delay was my rebellion. In private, my father reminded me of the cost of weakness. He spoke of my grandfather, executed by his own counsel when he hesitated. He spoke of bloodlines extinguished by sentiment. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. The council watched me closely after that. Their smiles thinned, their questions sharpened. They sensed divergence, they always did. War crept closer, not as a roar, but as a rumor. A border skirmish, a disputed inheritance, an insult left unanswered. The realm shifted beneath us, and still the tapestries pretended all victories were clean. In her presence, I allowed myself to forget. Only briefly, only enough to survive. She spoke of her family with warmth and grief intertwined. Brothers lost, lands taxed into barrenness, promises made by kings long dead. She never asked me to choose her. That was her quiet cruelty. That was her love. I knew even then that something would be demanded of me, that love would be named treason. That truth would be reshaped to serve power. The council did not tolerate fractures. They sealed them, often with blood. At night, I lay awake, listening to the palace breathe. I thought of the crown waiting. I thought of her hands. I thought of my brother's future, balanced on decisions he would never be allowed to make. Resignation settled into me not as despair, but as preparation. I began to understand that survival within the throne required sacrifice beyond flesh. It required silence. It required surrender. And still I loved her. That was the wound I carried into the days that followed, untreated, unnamed, growing. The knowledge that I loved her changed nothing, and yet it altered everything. Each morning I dressed with the same precision, attended the same councils, spoke the same measured words. But inside, a quiet resistance took root. Not rebellion, not hope. Something more dangerous. Attachment. Love, when forbidden, does not announce itself with fire. It settles slowly, like frost in the bones. I found myself measuring time not by bells or summons, but by the moments I might see her again. In the south gallery, along the outer gardens, in corridors where the guards grew accustomed to looking away. She knew more than she let on, of the court, of me. I began to suspect she had always known who I was, yet she never spoke it aloud. She granted me the dignity of illusion. I returned it with silence. The council intensified their hold. They summoned me more frequently, spoke to me less as an heir and more as a vessel. The realm, they said, stood at a precipice. Our enemies tested us because they sensed uncertainty, because the crown had grown soft. Soft. That word followed me. They spoke of marriage as strategy, a daughter of the Western houses, a widow of proven loyalty, a union that would bring soldiers, coin, stability. They never asked what I wanted. They asked only when. My father supported them openly now. Where once he lectured in private, he now corrected me before others. He reminded the court of his own sacrifices, of the wars he fought to secure my inheritance. He framed my hesitation as ingratitude. My mother said nothing. Her silence was heavier than his anger. She watched me with eyes that seemed already to be mourning. My brother drifted further from me, not by choice, but by consequence. The more I was pressed toward the throne, the more he was shielded from it. Tutors redirected him. Guards escorted him elsewhere. He began to understand that the palace had decided something about our futures. He did not yet know what. When I was with her, the world narrowed. Not into escape, but into clarity. She did not speak of crowns or wars unless I did. She spoke of the land beyond the walls, of the way seasons shaped lives without permission, of how power always claimed necessity as its defense. She challenged me without defiance, asked questions without accusation. When I spoke of duty, she asked whom it served. When I spoke of sacrifice, she asked who would remember it. I began to fear her questions more than the council's demands, because they forced me to confront the truth I avoided, that I could choose, that my refusal to choose was itself a decision, that by clinging to love in secret, I was allowing others to shape its end. The war drew closer. Messengers arrived with dust on their cloaks and fear in their voices. Villages burned along the eastern border. Old alliances fractured. The council argued not over whether to respond, but how brutally. They wanted unity through fear. They always had. One evening, my father confronted me alone. No guards, no witnesses. He spoke not as king, but as a man who had learned too late what hesitation cost. He told me of a woman he once loved, a woman he sent away to secure the throne. He told me he never saw her again. He did not ask for my understanding. He demanded my compliance. I realized then that the throne did not only consume the future, it devoured the past. It erased alternatives until only one path remained, and called that inevitability. I sought her out that night, not to confess, not to promise, only to look at her as though memory itself depended on it. We spoke little. There was nothing left to disguise. When she touched my hand, there was no desperation in it, only sorrow. She told me she had been summoned, that her family had been questioned, that the council had begun to close its grip. She did not blame me. That was the cruelty of it. She told me she understood the cost of loving someone claimed by the realm. I wanted to tell her I would choose her. The words rose, urgent and reckless, but they died before reaching my mouth, because choice, once spoken, demands action. And I was not yet ready to destroy everything I had been shaped to protect. That night, I lay awake with the knowledge that love once revealed becomes a weapon in the hands of those who despise it. The council knew. I felt it in their glances, in the way their questions sharpened. They spoke now of loyalty tests, of internal threats, of examples that must be made. They did not name her, they did not need to. I began to understand the depth of their lie. They spoke of stability, but what they desired was control. They spoke of peace, but what they practiced was erasure. Anyone who reminded the crown of its humanity became expendable. My resignation deepened, not into numbness, but into resolve. If I was to lose her, it would not be because I was blind. If the throne demanded blood, it would have to take it knowingly. I watched my brother from a distance. He laughed with a freedom that felt dangerous now. I wondered how long before the council turned its gaze on him as well. How long before innocence became liability. I loved her. I loved my family. I loved the realm. In the abstract way one loves something inherited rather than chosen. These loves were not compatible. I finally understood that. The war drums sounded closer each day, and with them, the narrowing of every possible path. The council no longer pretended patience. Their summons came at dawn, abrupt and collective. Not the measured invitation of governance, but the insistence of men who believed time itself belonged to them. I entered the chamber to find them already seated, cloaks arranged like judgments rendered in advance. My father stood apart, hands clasped behind his back. He did not look at me. They spoke of war first. They always did when they wished to justify cruelty. The Eastern lords had united under a banner older than our crown, claiming ancestral right. Skirmishes had become campaigns. Farms burned. Roads vanished beneath marching feet. The realm demanded certainty, they said. It demanded strength. Then they spoke of loyalty within the palace. They did not accuse me. Accusation would have allowed defense. Instead, they spoke in abstractions, of threats that grow unnoticed, of softness masquerading as compassion, of how history punishes rulers who allow personal sentiment to cloud judgment. One of them, the oldest, leaned forward and spoke of my grandfather again, of how the council had acted to preserve the realm when the king could not. He called it necessity. He called it courage. I understood then what they were doing. They were reminding me that the throne did not protect its occupants. It consumed them when convenient. They proposed a decree, a temporary measure, they claimed, increased surveillance within the palace, questioning of lesser houses, restrictions on movement, all in the name of internal security. I asked who had been accused. They smiled. My father finally spoke. He said the realm could not afford division. He said the people needed an image of unity. He said my marriage must be announced before the next council session. A binding alliance, a visible sacrifice. The word sacrifice hung between us, heavy with implication. I agreed, not because I accepted their terms, but because refusal would have accelerated what I was trying to delay. Agreement bought time. Time was the only currency I had left. As I left the chamber, I felt the weight of unseen eyes. The palace had shifted. Corridors once familiar now felt narrowed, their walls listening. Servants avoided me. Guards lingered longer than necessary. I sought her out and found her absent. That absence frightened me more than any council decree. I asked discreet questions. I received careful answers. She had been confined to her family's quarters. For their protection, they said. Protection was another word the council used when they meant leverage. When I finally saw her again, it was under watch. A garden meeting sanctioned by protocol, with attendants positioned just far enough to pretend discretion. She stood straighter than before. Her eyes had hardened, not with anger but with understanding. She told me her father had been summoned. Her brother questioned. Old debts raised, old loyalties scrutinized. The council was rewriting her family's history in preparation for its erasure. I told her about the marriage decree, not as confession, as warning. She nodded, as though she had already expected it. She said the realm always demands proof of obedience from those born too close to power. She said she had never doubted how this would end. That hurt more than accusation ever could. The villain did not arrive with banners or raised voices. He had always been there, seated at the council table, speaking softly of necessity, wearing the face of tradition. He was not one man, but an idea given flesh, the belief that the throne justified all betrayals. The council began to isolate my brother next. Tutors dismissed, friends reassigned. They praised his purity, his untainted spirit, even as they removed him from view. They were protecting the succession, they claimed. I recognized the pattern. They were shaping contingencies. War reached the capital in whispers of defeat. A lost outpost, a failed negotiation. Each failure was placed at my feet without being named. The implication was clear. My hesitation weakened us. My humanity endangered the realm. My father fell ill, or perhaps he simply grew tired. He withdrew from public appearances. The council filled the vacuum effortlessly. Decisions were made without him, announcements issued in his name. I began to see how this would end, not with my refusal, with my compliance twisted into guilt, with my love framed as treason, with my family presented as collateral damage necessary for stability. I met with her one last time without sanction. I risked it because some truths must be spoken even when they change nothing. I told her the council would not stop, that her family would be destroyed whether or not I married, that my obedience would not save her. She listened without tears. She told me she had known the moment they allowed us to meet freely. The council never grants mercy without extracting payment later. She asked me only one thing, not to deny what we had been, not to let them rewrite it into something shameful. I promised her that. It was the only promise left within my power. As war banners were raised above the walls, I stood before the people and announced my betrothal. Cheers followed, relief, applause crafted from fear. That night, the council convened without me. By morning, her family had been charged with sedition. The lie had been spoken, repeated, formalized, and I understood finally that the throne was not my obstacle, it was my executioner. War no longer waited at the borders. It pressed against the gates of the realm, demanding recognition. The air in the capital grew tense, brittle, as though a single breath might shatter it. Bells rang more often now, not in celebration, but in warning. The people moved differently, quicker, quieter. Fear had become a shared language. The council seized the moment with practiced ease. They declared a state of emergency. Powers consolidated, rights suspended. Every decree carried the same justification: survival. The king's illness made him invisible. The throne remained, but its voice belonged to others. I was summoned not as heir, but as symbol. They dressed me carefully, chose my words, positioned me before the court like a shield. I spoke of unity, of resolve, of the coming struggle. I did not speak of truth. Truth had been deemed destabilizing. Behind me, the council watched the crowd. They were not looking for loyalty. They were looking for weakness. My brother was sent away under guard, to a distant estate, for his safety. I did not protest. Protest would have revealed how little safety remained within the palace walls. Her family vanished from public record, titles suspended, lands seized, their names spoken only in accusation. The speed of it was deliberate. The council understood momentum. Once the lie began to move, it became difficult to stop. I tried to intervene quietly. I appealed to men who had once spoken of honor. They listened with sympathetic faces and empty hands. Honor, I learned, survives only when it is not tested. She was no longer permitted to leave her quarters. Letters were intercepted, messages altered or lost. I began to fear that even memory could be taken from me. The war worsened. Armies clashed beyond the hills. Smoke rose where fields once stood. Reports arrived soaked in blood and confusion. Victories exaggerated, defeats minimized. The council curated reality with precision. They demanded harsher measures, conscription expanded, punishment sharpened, dissent labeled treason. Each escalation was framed as reluctant necessity, each step further from mercy, justified by the one before it. I stood at the edge of decisions I had never wanted. Orders crossed my desk bearing my seal, already prepared. I could refuse, I could delay. Or I could sign and pretend I was preserving something greater than myself. I signed. Each mark of ink felt like a fracture, small, invisible, irreversible. The villain revealed himself fully then, not in cruelty, but in confidence. The council no longer feared exposure. They had the war. They had the narrative. They had me. One of them spoke to me privately. He praised my composure, my understanding of sacrifice. He said I was becoming a true king. He said history would forgive what the present could not. I asked him what history would say of those falsely accused. He smiled and said history belongs to the victors. I realized then that the council had never intended to share power. The throne was a mask. They ruled through it, not under it. Kings were temporary, councils endured. My father died without ceremony, a quiet announcement, a brief mourning period, no investigation. The war required focus. The realm required continuity. The crown was placed upon my head before I could feel its weight approaching. Applause filled the hall. I bowed. I accepted. Resignation completed its transformation into entrapment. As king, I possessed authority in name. In practice, every decision arrived prearranged. They guided my hand, corrected my impulses, reminded me of consequences. They presented me with final evidence against her family, confessions extracted, documents forged, a case sealed beyond appeal. They asked me to confirm the sentence, execution, public, decisive, a demonstration of unity. I did not sleep that night. I walked the palace alone, tracing walls I had known since childhood. I thought of my brother, far away and ignorant. I thought of the people who believed in the image I had been forced to become. I thought of her. At dawn, I went to her quarters under the pretense of farewell. Guards watched. Walls listened. She looked at me as though she had been expecting this moment her entire life. I did not tell her what the council demanded. She already knew. I told her only that the lie would not end with her, that the throne devours truth to survive. She took my hands and told me something I had never allowed myself to believe, that love does not require survival to be real, that even if the world erased her, it would not erase what we had been. When I left, I knew the war outside was nothing compared to the one I was about to lose within myself. The shadow had reached the heart of the palace. The days that followed moved without shape. Time became a series of obligations fulfilled by habit rather than will. I attended councils, I signed decrees, I listened to reports of battles whose names blurred together. Victory and defeat lost distinction. All outcomes felt the same. Inside me, something had collapsed, not loudly, not with spectacle. It gave way the way stone does after years of pressure, quietly, completely. They brought the documents again, final authorization, my seal required. The council no longer argued, they waited. Patience was their last cruelty. I dismissed them without decision. That alone unsettled them. Delay was a language they did not tolerate from those they believed fully contained. I went to the chapel where my mother still prayed. She knelt as she always had, hands folded, lips moving in devotion that no longer asked for miracles. When she looked at me, I saw the cost of endurance etched into her face. She had survived by surrendering parts of herself one by one. She did not ask what troubled me. She never had. She said only that the crown takes everything it is not denied, that love, when hidden, grows heavier rather than safer. I realized then that she had known, perhaps always. Mothers often do. My brother sent a letter from exile. It spoke of horses and cold mornings and boredom. It avoided anything real. At the end, he asked when he might return home. I could not answer him. The council increased the pressure. They spoke now of urgency, of morale, of the need for a decisive act to unify the realm. They hinted at unrest within the capital, at murmurs questioning my resolve. They reminded me that kings who hesitate invite replacement. I asked them directly what would happen if I refused. They did not threaten me. That was their confidence. They spoke instead of alternatives, of regencies, of councils ruling in times of weakness, of brothers better suited to command. My brother's name was not spoken. It did not need to be. That night, I ordered wine and drank alone until the room swayed. I thought perhaps numbness could still be reached. It could not. Every thought returned to the same place, to her standing alone, carrying the weight of a lie designed to justify power. I realized then that the impossible choice had already been made, not by me, but around me. The only decision left was how much of myself I would lose in its execution. At dawn, I asked to see her. The council objected. I insisted. Kingship, even hollow, still carried fragments of authority. They allowed it, certain that nothing would change. She was brought to a smaller chamber, guarded, restrained not by chains, but by inevitability. She looked thinner, not weakened, sharpened, as though suffering had burned away illusion. I told her the execution was scheduled. I told her where, when. I told her because lies had taken enough from us. She did not cry. She asked me one question only, whether I believed the lie. I told her no. She said that was enough. She asked me to remember her not as a victim, but as a choice I was once brave enough to make, even briefly. She said that memory, carried by a king, could become a seed of resistance. I wanted to kneel, to beg forgiveness, to offer escape, even knowing it was impossible. Instead, I stood there, wearing the crown that had already taken everything from both of us. When she was led away, something inside me finally broke free from restraint. Not hope, resolve. The council convened that afternoon. Final confirmations, public arrangements. They spoke of the crowd, of spectacle, of closure. I listened until they finished. Then I spoke. I told them I would attend the execution, that I would speak, that the realm deserved to hear the truth from its king. They resisted at once. They spoke of protocol, of risk, of incitement. I reminded them that the crown rested on my head, not theirs, that if they wished to remove it, they would have to do so openly. They yielded, reluctantly. They believed the truth could still be controlled if framed carefully. They underestimated grief. The day arrived beneath a sky too clear for mercy. The square filled early, faces upturned, hungry for reassurance, for a villain made visible. I stood above them, the weight of expectation crushing what remained of me. She was brought forward, unbowed. Her eyes found mine. I began to speak. I did not read the prepared statement. I spoke of the lie, of how fear had been dressed as necessity, of how power had learned to survive by sacrificing the innocent. I spoke of the council without naming them and named them without speaking. The crowd shifted, murmurs rose, guards tightened their grips. The council shouted for me to stop. I continued. I confessed my love, not in romance, in defiance. I told them that I loved her not despite the crown, but against it, that this love was the measure of everything the throne had stolen from the realm. The council moved then. Orders shouted. Guards surged. I finished with the only truth that mattered, that a king who obeys injustice is no king at all. They seized me, dragged me back. The crowd erupted, not in unity, in confusion, in anger. She was taken away before the sentence could be carried out. The council had not expected this outcome. They had expected submission until the end. The collapse was complete. Not of the realm, of the illusion. In that moment, I knew there was no return. Whatever followed would be built on ruin, on consequence. But for the first time since my birth, the choice had been mine. They imprisoned me before nightfall. Not in some distant dungeon, but within the palace itself. A chamber stripped of banners, guarded by men who would not meet my eyes. The council acted swiftly, as they always did when control slipped. They declared my speech a symptom of grief, a lapse brought on by war and loss. They spoke of temporary confinement, of protection, of order. They did not yet dare to call it treason. Outside those walls, the city burned with uncertainty. I could hear it even through stone. Shouts, bells rung without rhythm. The crowd had not dispersed cleanly. They had tasted doubt, and doubt does not fade easily. The council convened without me. Of that I was certain. They would be arguing not about justice, but about timing, about how best to excise a king without shattering the image of stability. I had seen this process before, from the other side of the table. They brought her to me at dawn. That was their mistake. 2 guards stood at the door. A council representative remained inside, pretending courtesy. She was pale, but unbroken. They believed they were granting me closure. A final compliance extracted through emotion. They underestimated what had already been taken. I did not touch her. I did not beg. I spoke calmly, deliberately, as though every word were already part of history. I told her the realm would fracture, that the lie could not survive exposure, that whatever happened to me, the truth had already begun to move beyond reach. She told me the people had shouted my name after I was taken. Not all, not enough to save a king, enough to break certainty. The council representative interrupted. He said time was limited. He said sentiment no longer served anyone. I looked at him and saw fear beneath the authority, not fear of me, fear of what could not be undone. I told her then what I had never said aloud. that loving her had not been my weakness, that it had been the only moment of clarity I had ever known, that if the throne demanded her life to sustain itself, then the throne deserved to fall. The representative ordered her removed. She did not resist. At the door, she turned once more, not in farewell, in recognition, as though we had already crossed the point beyond which outcome no longer mattered. That afternoon, the council returned. This time they did not speak in abstractions. They accused me openly of incitement, of destabilization, of endangering the realm in a time of war. They spoke of abdication as mercy, of exile as compromise. They placed a document before me, a confession carefully worded, an agreement to step aside for the good of the realm. In exchange, her execution would proceed quietly, without spectacle. That was the moment of no return. I laughed, not loudly, not with bitterness, with understanding, the kind that arrives only when illusion has been stripped bare. I told them they had misunderstood the nature of power, that it does not reside in councils or crowns, but in the stories people are forced to accept. I refused to sign. They struck me then, not in rage, in calculation. A single blow meant to remind me of my place. I tasted blood and iron and thought of all the kings before me who had knelt at this same threshold. I told them they could kill me, that they likely would, but that if they executed her now, the lie would become martyrdom, that if they spared her, it would become confession. Either way, their control would fracture. They hesitated. That hesitation was everything. News arrived before they could decide. Riots near the Eastern Gate, soldiers refusing orders, a noble house withdrawing support, citing conscience. The war had turned, not at the border, but at the heart. The council argued among themselves now. Voices raised, unity cracked. They ordered my confinement extended. They postponed all sentences. In the chaos, my brother returned. They had sent for him days earlier, preparing contingencies. He arrived not as pawn, but as witness. He saw the guards, the locked chambers, the fractured authority, and he understood more than they expected. He came to me that night, escorted but unrestrained. His eyes were no longer those of a child. He asked me one question only: whether everything they said about me was true. I told him yes, not their accusations, the truth beneath them, that I had chosen love over obedience, that I had spoken against injustice knowing the cost. He did not hesitate. He told the guards to leave us, and they did. The council's power was already slipping. They had ruled too long through fear. Fear dissolves quickly, once defied. By morning, factions had formed, within the court, within the army, even within the council itself. Some demanded my execution, others my restoration. None spoke of her openly, but her name moved through the city like a prayer. The council had wanted a decisive act. They had created a reckoning. And I knew, with a clarity sharper than any crown had ever given me, that whatever survived this conflict would not resemble the realm I had inherited. The truth had been spoken. Blood would follow. The reckoning did not arrive as thunder. It came as exhaustion. Days blurred together as the palace emptied itself of certainty. Orders were issued and ignored. Messengers returned unanswered. The council chamber became a place of arguments rather than decisions, its once quiet authority drowned beneath raised voices and fractured loyalties. The war beyond the walls faltered. Armies fight on belief as much as steel, and belief had begun to rot. Units refused to march. Commanders delayed engagements. Word spread faster than banners ever could. The king had defied the council. The king had spoken of lies. The king had been imprisoned by those who claimed to serve him. That story could not be contained. They released me on the 5th day, not with apology, not with ceremony. They called it necessity. They said the realm required my presence to calm unrest. They returned my crown as though it had never left my head. I wore it without comment. Her fate remained unresolved. That uncertainty was deliberate. The council still believed she was leverage. They did not yet understand that leverage loses value once exposed. My brother stood beside me now, not as shadow, but as equal. He attended councils. He spoke when they attempted to silence him. The men who once dismissed him now watched him carefully, measuring him as a future they could no longer fully shape. Loss settled across the palace like ash. Servants dismissed, guards replaced, advisors vanished overnight. Some fled, some were arrested, some simply disappeared, claimed by the same machinery they had once operated. The council fractured publicly at last. Accusations surfaced, records leaked, old executions revisited. The lie that had cost me everything began to consume its authors. One by one, they fell. Not through justice, through consequence. Some were exiled, some imprisoned. One took his own life before he could be questioned. The oldest among them was brought before me, no longer cloaked in authority, but age and fear. He spoke of intention, of service, of choices made to preserve the realm. I told him preservation without truth is only decay delayed. I did not order his execution. I ordered his memory erased, his name struck from record. He wept at that. Power fears oblivion more than death. The war ended without victory, a ceasefire negotiated by weary men who no longer believed in total triumph. Borders redrawn slightly, losses acknowledged quietly, no songs written. The people did not celebrate. They mourned, for sons lost, for certainty broken, for the image of the crown they could no longer believe in fully. She was brought before me weeks later, not in chains, not in triumph, in silence heavy with everything that had been taken from us. Her family's charges were formally dismissed, their lands partially restored, too late to repair what had been destroyed. I looked at her and understood the cost of consequence. Even survival bears scars. We did not embrace. This was not a reunion shaped by victory. It was an accounting. I offered her safety, a place at court, recognition, all the things that once would have been considered generosity. She refused. She said the palace would always carry the echo of what had been done in its name, that she would not build a life in the shadow of a lie, even one that had begun to collapse. She said she did not regret loving me, but she would not be defined by it. That loss was quieter than the others, and somehow deeper. My mother died that winter. Peacefully, they said. She had lived long enough to see the throne weakened, and perhaps that was the mercy she had prayed for all along. My brother became my closest ally, not because he sought power, but because he understood its danger. Together we dismantled what we could, reduced the council's authority, opened records, allowed questions. The realm did not heal quickly. Some wounds never do. Trust returns slowly, if at all. I ruled not as the king I had been raised to become, but as one shaped by fracture rather than certainty. At night, I thought of her often, of the life we had almost lived, of the lie that had demanded blood to sustain itself, of how easily love becomes treason when power fears exposure. The cost had been everything I thought I was. The consequence was everything I became. I no longer sit upon the throne as I once imagined it. The crown rests on my head, but it does not define the shape of my days. That illusion died with the lie. What remains is weight without grandeur, responsibility stripped of reverence. The people do not bow as deeply now. Some look at me with trust earned through fracture. Others with suspicion that may never fade. I accept both. The palace is quieter, not peaceful, honest. We dismantled the council and rebuilt it slowly, imperfectly. Power resists restraint by nature, and I learned to expect betrayal not as anomaly, but as pattern. Records remain open. Decisions debated publicly. It makes governance slower. It also makes it real. The war left scars across the land that no decree can heal. I traveled among the provinces when the roads reopened. I listened more than I spoke. Mothers do not want speeches, they want acknowledgement. I gave what I could. My brother chose not to succeed me. That surprised many. He said he had seen too clearly what the crown demands and what it devours. He serves now as envoy, moving between houses, carrying words rather than authority. He understands, perhaps better than I ever did, how fragile unity truly is. As for her, she did not disappear from my life entirely. We did not belong to one another in the way stories promise, but we were not erased either. Letters reached me from time to time. Not confessions, observations, thoughts shaped by distance and survival. She rebuilt her family's lands with patience rather than bitterness. She did not return to court. That too was a kind of mercy. Love did not conquer the throne. It did not save the realm. It did something quieter and perhaps more enduring. It exposed the lie that power depends on obedience alone. It reminded me that legacy is not measured in years ruled, but in truths preserved. I am remembered now as the king who broke the council. Some say that with admiration, others with regret. History will argue long after my bones are dust. What it will not erase is this, that there was a moment when the crown demanded everything, and I gave it only what was necessary. That I allowed love to cost me power, comfort, certainty. That I chose resignation not as surrender but as clarity. The throne still stands, the realm endures, but it does so without the lie that once held it together. And when I'm gone, when another wears this crown and feels its pressure settle into their spine, I hope they remember that there was once a king who learned too late that truth cannot survive in silence. Yet he spoke anyway. That is the legacy I leave behind.